The little church at the edge of town smelled of dust, old pine, and fear. Its walls creaked under the weight of silence, though the pews were full. Men with sweat-stained hats. Women whispering behind their gloved hands. And in the aisle, stumbling forward in a threadbare white dress, came the girl everyone pitied, and secretly mocked. She was just 18. Her dress had been her mother's once, yellowed with age and mended in too many places to count. The sleeves hung loose on her thin arms. A wilting crown of wildflowers sat uneven on her head. Her shoes pinched. And her heart hammered so loud she feared it might echo through the rafters. At the end of the aisle stood the man who was now her husband-to-be. His name was Elias Crow, and he was older than her father, by at least 20 years. Deep grooves cut his weathered face, his beard was gray shot through with tobacco stains, and his hands, calloused from rope, reins, and whiskey bottles, looked more like claws than fingers. His eyes, pale and cold, didn't leave her as she approached. There was no warmth in them. Only ownership. The preacher cleared his throat. The crowd hushed. The girl's legs trembled so badly she thought she might collapse, but her father's hand pressed against her back, steadying her, not out of love, but to remind her there was no turning back. His debts were deep, his cattle gone, his land nearly lost. Elias Crow had offered salvation, at a price. The price stood shivering in the white dress. The preacher's voice droned. We are gathered here today, in the sight of God, to join this man and this woman in holy matrimony. The words blurred in her ears. She didn't hear vows of love. She heard the clink of chains. She thought of her childhood, bare feet racing across fields, the sound of her mother's laughter before sickness took her. Freedom. Sunshine. And now this, standing before a man who could have been her grandfather, binding her to him with a ring that felt more like a shackle. Do you, Elias Crow, take this woman? I do, he said, his voice a growl. The preacher turned. And do you, child, take this man? Her lips stuck together. The room seemed to spin. She wanted to scream. To run. But then she caught the eye of her father, who sat hunched in the front pew. His face was stone. No pity. No guilt. Only fear of what might happen if she refused. Behind him, her younger siblings, 2 boys with dirt-smudged faces, watched her with wide eyes, not understanding. They depended on her now. She swallowed. Her voice came out barely a whisper. I do. The preacher smiled, satisfied. Then by the power vested in me. The words were spoken. The ring slid onto her trembling finger. Applause broke, scattered and uneasy. Some women turned their heads away. Some men chuckled low, cruel laughs. Elias Crow leaned down, his breath hot with whiskey, and pressed his mouth to her cheek. Not a kiss, not really, more a branding. Mine, he muttered, just for her. The reception was no celebration. It was a business deal sealed. Outside the church, the townsfolk gathered, throwing weak congratulations. The girl stood stiff at Elias's side, her hand clamped in his iron grip. Her father collected his handshake like a bag of gold. The debt was gone, and with it, his daughter. She felt hollow. Each smile she forced was a crack in glass, fragile, ready to shatter. Smile wider, Elias hissed under his breath as they mounted his wagon. Let em know you're happy. You're Mrs. Crow now. The wagon rattled away, leaving the town and its whispers behind. Dust rose in clouds around the wheels, choking her throat. She sat frozen, hands in her lap, staring at the horizon. The ranch waited for her, his ranch. By the time they arrived, the sun was sinking, bleeding the sky red. The Crow Ranch spread wide across the plain, fields of tall grass, a cluster of barns, fences stretching into the distance. It should have been beautiful, but it felt desolate, cold, unwelcoming. Elias dragged her down from the wagon with little gentleness. "You'll learn quick enough," he said, marching her toward the big house. Its windows were dark, its wood weather-beaten, its porch sagging like the smile of a drunkard. Inside, the air was heavy with smoke and dust. The furniture was thick, dark, old. A bearskin rug curled at the edges, moth-eaten. Empty bottles lined the mantel. A place that reeked of a man living alone too long, and happy to keep it that way. "This is your home now," Elias said, voice low. "You'll cook. You'll clean. You'll keep your mouth shut. I don't need chatter. I need a wife who knows her place." Her heart squeezed. "Yes, sir," she whispered. He smirked, satisfied. "That's a start." Night fell. The girl sat by the window in the upstairs room he'd locked her in, staring out across the fields. Moonlight silvered the grass. Far away, a coyote howled, lonely and fierce. She pressed her hands to the glass, wanting to break it, to leap, to run barefoot into the wild until her lungs burst. But she didn't move. She couldn't. Her father's words echoed, "Do this for the family. You'll save us all. Save them. By sacrificing herself." Tears blurred her vision. She let them fall silently onto the sill. Below, she heard Elias's boots thudding across the wooden floor, heard the clink of a bottle being opened, heard him mutter to himself. A man older than her father. A husband by law. A stranger by heart. She closed her eyes, whispering a prayer. "God, if you hear me, give me a way out. Please." The coyote howled again, longer, louder. The sound carried across the plains like an omen. She shivered. Somewhere deep in her chest, beneath the fear and grief, a tiny ember sparked, faint, but alive. This was not the end of her story. Not yet. The first morning at Crow Ranch began with silence. No birdsong, no laughter, no voices. Only the wind pressing against the windows and the heavy tread of Elias's boots downstairs. The girl lay still in the narrow bed, eyes fixed on the ceiling. Her wedding dress, torn and dirty from yesterday, hung limp over the chair. She wished it were all a nightmare. But the ring on her finger cut like iron, reminding her of the truth. The door creaked open. Elias stood there, already dressed in his black duster coat, a hat low over his brow. His face was carved from stone. "Up," he ordered. "Day starts early here." She sat up slowly. "What do you want me to cook?" His eyes narrowed. "Breakfast. You know how to fry eggs?" "Yes." "Good. Then move." The kitchen was cold and unfriendly, just like the rest of the house. The girl fumbled with the iron skillet, hands shaking. Elias sat at the table, watching her as if she were livestock being judged. He said nothing while she worked. The silence weighed heavier than his words. When she set the plate in front of him, he ate with slow, deliberate bites. Not a thank you. Not even a glance. "You'll do the same every morning," he finally said. "Cook, clean, mend what's broken. And when I say something, you listen. Understand?" She nodded. He smirked. "Good girl." Days bled into each other like spilled ink. The ranch was vast, but it might as well have been a prison. Elias forbade her from leaving the yard. She swept the floors, scrubbed the dishes, mended his shirts, and every night listened to him stomp across the creaking boards below. She rarely spoke. He never asked. But in silence, she learned. When Elias left to ride the fences or settle disputes with neighbors, she studied the land from her window. She watched how the ranch hands saddled horses, how they tightened the cinch, how they mounted and rode. She saw where the water troughs stood, where the rifles leaned in the barn, how the gates latched. Each detail carved itself into her memory. Her fear did not fade, but something else began to grow. One evening, she overheard Elias speaking to two men in the parlor. She wasn't supposed to be listening, but the voices carried through the cracks in the floorboards. "You'll drive McKinney off his land," Elias growled, his tone like steel scraping. "That pasture's mine. If the old fool won't sell, he won't live to regret it." The men chuckled, cruel and eager. Her blood ran cold. This wasn't just about her. Elias Crow was a man who took what he wanted: land, cattle, even a young bride. He would spill blood without hesitation. She pressed a hand to her mouth, her heart slamming. She wasn't only trapped in a loveless marriage. She was trapped with a dangerous man. That night, she made her choice. She would escape. When the house finally fell quiet, she slipped from her bed. Barefoot, she crept across the floor, each board groaning under her weight. The moonlight lit her way as she eased the window open. The air was cool, carrying the scent of sage and dust. Freedom lay just beyond the fence line. Her heart raced as she lowered herself onto the porch roof, then down onto the dirt. She moved quick, her white nightdress blending with the pale glow of the moon. The barn loomed ahead. If she could just reach a horse. A sound behind her froze her blood. Boot steps. Heavy. Slow. Elias's voice cut the silence. "And where do you think you're going, girl?" She spun. He stood in the shadows, a lantern in one hand, a rifle in the other. His face was twisted into a grin that sent a chill down her spine. She stammered, breathless. "I just... Don't lie to me." His voice cracked like a whip. He stomped forward, the lantern swinging. "You think you can run? Think you can make a fool of me?" Her knees nearly buckled. "Please." Before she could finish, he grabbed her arm, yanking her so hard she cried out. His grip was iron, bruising her skin. "You belong here," he growled. "You belong to me. Don't ever forget it." He dragged her back into the house, threw her onto the wooden floor so hard her breath left her lungs. The lantern light cast wild shadows across the walls. "You run again, and I'll break you," he said coldly, pointing the rifle at her trembling form. "Understand?" She nodded, tears spilling. "Say it." "I understand." Satisfied, he slammed the door and locked it behind him. His boots faded away down the hall. She lay there on the floor, clutching her bruised arm, staring at the ceiling through tears. Hours passed before she crawled back to the window. Her chest still heaved. Her throat still burned with fear. But as she looked out at the horizon, something stirred inside her. A whisper, soft but steady. "I won't die here." She repeated it again, firmer this time. "I won't die here." Her hands clenched into fists. She had failed tonight. But failure was not the end. The silence of the ranch pressed in around her, heavy and suffocating. Yet within it, she nursed that ember of defiance, protecting it, feeding it. She would try again. One day. One night. When the chance came, she would seize it. And Elias Crow would never see it coming. The days after her failed escape crawled like wounded snakes. The silence of the ranch pressed heavier, and Elias's eyes followed her everywhere. He trusted no one, not the ranch hands, not the neighbors, and certainly not his new bride. She felt his suspicion in every glance, every muttered warning. But life has a way of planting seeds in even the driest soil. It happened one morning when Elias left before dawn to meet with some men in town. She was hanging laundry on the line, the wind snapping the sheets like sails. A horse clattered up the dirt road, and she froze, clutching the damp fabric. The rider was young, maybe not much older than she was. He wore a sweat-stained hat, his shirt rolled at the sleeves, revealing strong forearms marked with rope burns. He dismounted with easy grace, leading his horse toward the barn. "Morning, ma'am," he said, tipping his hat politely. His voice carried a softness rare in this harsh land. She blinked, startled. No man had spoken to her gently since the wedding. "Good morning," she managed, her voice small. "I'm Tom Avery," he said. "Crow hired me last week to mend fences and break a few colts." He paused, studying her face with quiet curiosity. "You must be Mrs. Crow." Her stomach tightened at the name, but she nodded. "Yes." For a moment, silence hung between them, filled only by the flap of laundry and the restless snort of his horse. Then Tom gave a slight smile, quick, but genuine. "If you need anything fixed around here, you let me know. I don't just mend fences." Her lips parted, surprise flickering. A kindness. A choice of words that felt like more than coincidence. But before she could reply, Elias's voice cracked across the yard like a whip. "Tom!" The girl flinched. Elias had returned sooner than expected. He strode toward them, his pale eyes narrowing. "You got work to do. Don't waste time flap-pin your gums." Tom dipped his head. "Yes, sir." Without another word, he led his horse into the barn. Elias's gaze swung to her, sharp as a knife. "You stay away from him," he said low, his breath sour with whiskey. "You so much as look at another man, you'll regret it." Her throat tightened. She nodded, eyes downcast. But inside, that ember of defiance glowed brighter. Tom became a shadow at the edges of her days. She saw him from the window, working the horses, fixing the fences, his movements sure and steady. When Elias wasn't around, Tom found reasons to linger near the porch, offering a quiet nod or a murmured word. One afternoon, as she fetched water from the well, Tom approached with a canteen in hand. "Hot day," he said, voice low. She glanced nervously toward the house. "Yes." He leaned closer, his tone gentle but firm. "Don't let him break you." Her breath caught. Her eyes lifted to his, and for the first time in weeks, she saw something other than coldness or cruelty. She saw understanding. A spark. A lifeline. The spark turned to flame the night Elias nearly killed Tom. It began with nothing, just a glance. The girl had been serving supper, setting the pot of stew on the table. Tom had stepped inside to return a borrowed tool. Their eyes met for barely a second, but Elias noticed. His hand slammed the table, rattling the dishes. "You look at her again, boy, and I'll gut you." Tom froze, jaw tightening. "I meant no harm, Mr. Crow." "Don't talk back." Elias roared, reaching for his whip on the wall. The girl stepped between them without thinking. "Stop." The word cracked through the room, sharp and desperate. Elias's eyes blazed. For a moment, silence. Then, slowly, dangerously, he lowered the whip. He sneered at her, his lips curling. "You'll pay for that later." Tom's eyes locked on hers, fierce with unspoken words. Then he turned and left, his boots striking hard against the floorboards. Her hands shook as Elias grabbed her arm, digging his fingers into her flesh. But in her chest, something shifted. She wasn't only afraid anymore. She was angry. The days that followed carried whispers of violence. Bandits had raided McKinney's ranch to the north, setting fire to the barn and running off his cattle. The town buzzed with rumors, and though no one spoke Elias's name aloud, the girl knew. She remembered the conversation overheard in the parlor. And then came the night of fire. She and Tom had been tending to the horses in the barn when the alarm bell clanged from the north ridge. Shouts echoed, hooves thundered. Bandits, again. Tom's eyes burned with urgency. "We have to help." Her blood surged. "Elias will hide. He always does. Then we'll stand." He pressed a rifle into her hands, the weight shocking but solid. "Can you shoot?" She hesitated. Then nodded. The barn doors burst open, the night alive with flames in the distance. The cries of cattle split the air. Tom swung into the saddle, pulling her up behind him. They rode hard, the wind tearing at her hair, the rifle heavy against her chest. The scene at McKinney's ranch was chaos. Bandits swarmed like wolves, torches in hand. McKinney himself fired from the porch, his son struggling beside him. "Take cover!" Tom shouted, leaping down, pulling her with him. Gunfire cracked, sharp and deafening. She pressed her back against the water trough, heart hammering. Tom fired steady, each shot ringing true. Then one of the bandits turned toward her, pistol raised. Time slowed. She stared, trembling. She had done it. She had saved herself. McKinney's men rallied, emboldened. The bandits broke, retreating into the night with curses and gunshots fading. The flames sputtered, dying down under buckets of water. And there she stood, her nightdress singed, her hands black with soot, her eyes wide not with fear but with fire. For the first time, she wasn't a victim. She was a fighter. The town would talk of it for days. Of the girl who stood with Tom Avery, rifle in hand, driving off bandits while Elias Crow was nowhere to be seen. And Elias, oh, Elias heard every word. When he returned that night, his eyes glowed with rage. He slammed his fist against the wall, the house trembling. "You think you're brave now? You think you're more than what I made you?" She met his gaze for the first time without flinching. "I don't belong to you." His face twisted, pale with fury. "You'll regret crossing me, girl. Mark my words." He stormed from the room, the door slamming like thunder. She stood alone, the rifle still in her grip, her breath steady. The horizon burned with the last glow of dying fires. But inside her, a new dawn had already begun. The ranch house felt colder after the raid. The walls groaned in the wind, the windows rattled like bones. But it wasn't the weather that chilled the girl, it was Elias. His silence was worse than his fury. He watched her with pale, unblinking eyes, like a rattlesnake coiled and waiting. She felt it in every step of the floorboards. Something was coming. 3 days later, the storm broke. She was in the kitchen, kneading dough, when the door slammed open. Elias stalked in, mud streaking his boots, his coat dripping with rain. His eyes burned. "Where's Avery?" he demanded. She froze. "In the barn, I think." His lips curled. "Not for long." He grabbed his rifle and strode back out. Her hands stilled, flour falling from her fingers. Panic surged through her chest. She knew what he meant to do. She snatched the nearest lantern and ran, skirts tangling around her legs. The rain lashed down, turning the yard to mud. She skidded to a halt at the barn, chest heaving. Inside, Tom was saddling a horse. He looked up, startled. "What's wrong?" "It's Elias, he's coming for you." No sooner had the words left her mouth than the barn doors slammed open. Elias stood there, water dripping from his hat, rifle raised. "You," he snarled, his voice thunder. "You think you can steal my wife? You think you can make a fool of me?" Tom's hand hovered near his holster, but Elias aimed first. The girl stepped between them. "No. Move aside," Elias growled, his finger tightening on the trigger. Her heart hammered, but she didn't move. Rain drummed on the barn roof, the horses shifting nervously. "You don't own me," she said, her voice steady though her knees shook. "Not anymore." For a heartbeat, Elias hesitated. Then his face twisted, rage winning. He shoved her aside, swinging the barrel toward Tom. The girl acted without thought. She grabbed the lantern from the wall and hurled it. The glass shattered against Elias's shoulder. Flames erupted, licking up his coat. He roared, dropping the rifle, clawing at the fire. Tom lunged forward, tackling him to the ground. The barn exploded into chaos. Horses screamed, kicking against stalls. Flames spread across the hay, sparks flying. "Get out!" Tom shouted, shoving her toward the door. But Elias wasn't finished. With a guttural roar, he wrenched free, lunging for his revolver. His eyes gleamed wild in the firelight, his face half shadow, half flame. "You'll die with me, girl." The girl's hand closed on the fallen rifle. She raised it, her breath steady, her hands no longer trembling. The world narrowed to a single heartbeat. Elias's eyes widened. The rifle thundered. Elias staggered, eyes glassy, then collapsed into the straw, the flames closing around him. The girl lowered the weapon, her chest rising and falling with fierce, burning breaths. Tom seized her hand. "Come on." They raced out of the barn just as the roof caved, fire consuming the old timbers in a roar. Rain hissed against the flames, steam rising like ghosts into the night. By dawn, the barn was nothing but blackened beams and ash. The storm had passed, leaving the sky bruised purple and gold. The girl stood in the yard, her dress scorched, her hair tangled, but her back straight, her chin high. The townsfolk came riding, drawn by the smoke. They saw the wreckage. They heard the story. Whispers passed from mouth to mouth like wildfire. Elias Crow was gone. The girl he had shackled was free. Some shook their heads in disbelief. Some smiled quietly, respect in their eyes. A few dared to nod to her, as if she were no longer just the poor girl, but something more, someone forged strong in fire. Tom stood near, silent, watching her with steady eyes. But he didn't step forward. He didn't claim her. He knew, as she did, that this victory was hers alone. She breathed deep, the morning air sharp and clean. For the first time, the horizon wasn't a prison wall. It was wide open, endless, waiting. That evening, she saddled a horse by herself. The leather creaked under her hands, the reins firm in her grip. Tom appeared at the barn door, his hat in his hand. "Where will you go?" he asked softly. She swung into the saddle, her posture strong. "Wherever the road takes me." A smile touched his lips. "Then ride hard." She nodded, eyes fixed on the horizon. The sun dipped low, painting the plains in fire and gold. She kicked her heels, and the horse leapt forward, hooves pounding against the earth. The wind tore through her hair, cool and wild. She laughed, a sound bright and fierce, echoing across the empty land. At last, she was free. They thought she was nothing but a pawn, a poor girl, sold and shackled to a man twice her father's age. But the Wild West has a way of testing souls. And in the end, she rose from the ashes of fear, scarred yet unbroken, proving that even the weakest flame can blaze into fire. If this story moved you, don't forget to like, subscribe, and share your thoughts in the comments. Because every voice deserves to be heard, and every chain, broken.